Yeah. You already know. Scapa Copper. Young millionaires. The general. Okay, I wake up every day. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. Every day I'm getting paid. Man, this life is going great. I just wanna celebrate. I made it in and out of state. $1 million in the case. I got it hidden somewhere safe. I multiply all my millions and really I am extremely wealthy. I distributed my millions with my family. This is just the beginning. I purchased a Lamborghini, driving around the city. Believe me, you haven't seen me. Made it through all the struggle, defeated all of my rivals. I was never entitled, I had to fight for survival. Man, this life is amazing. It's crazy that where we made it. Now I'm living my dreams and I'm burning, just getting started. I made it through the struggle back when I was very worried. Now I'm chilling, get my condo, Lamborghinis and Bugatti. I know you in a hurry, but I promise don't be worried. When you see me in the club, I probably got enough to party. I'm a multi-millionaire, getting money everywhere. I ain't tripping on nobody, I just came to celebrate. Yeah, we got the party popping, got the general over here, throwing money in the air, cause we get it every day. I multiply all my millions, now me and my people winning. Moving city to city, I promise that you will see me driving a Lamborghini, but this is just the beginning. $1 million Bugatti, I'm stacking money in the ceiling. Multiply all my millions, now me and my people winning. Moving city to city, I promise that you will see me driving a Lamborghini, but this is just the beginning. $1 million Bugatti, I'm stacking money in the ceiling.
The Truth Podcast, live from the grill. We got Big John, we got Winston, we're missing Nikki Six. She's out there making money. What's up, guys?
What's going on?
Yeah, I'm excited. Today's topic is going to be huge. It's about burdens, right? And so burdens in your life, how do you determine how much you can actually handle before you break? I'm excited about this topic today with all the stuff that's gone on just with COVID. And, you know, so for a lot of people in 2021, life started a little bit not as great as people thought it was going to start, but we want to make sure that we're balancing this stuff. And so, you know, the general's going to give it to you from his gospel, what I think about burdens and mental burdens. And it's been crazy because I get an opportunity to talk to a lot of people, you know, just in life, you know, when I'm in business meetings and stuff, and people ask me a lot of questions. And so what I want to be able to really understand is why is like these burdens, what is really going to mess people up on them, right? So first I want to talk about, kind of give an example, and you guys give stuff is like mental burdens, and where these mental burdens can start, and then they physically get to, they can go mess you up physically, right? Because I've always told you, you know, wherever your mind starts, your body follows, and that's kind of a scary part. And that's true for myself. That's something that major that I go through.
Right.
So, you know, I was talking to a few people, and I think one of the things is, and this is a lot in the culture, I would say a lot of the culture in New Mexico, and I'm going to say just the culture in general, but on mental burdens, sometimes our family can actually put mental burdens on us that we really don't owe. And one of the crazy things is I've said, you know, I've kind of always been like, I don't want to say not really prone to this. You know what I'm trying to say? And I think a lot because I grew up pretty different, and my mom wanted me to be very independent of like the family and stuff. But one of the things that I see in Albuquerque a lot, and this could be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I don't have a real opinion on it, but I think a lot of the older generation puts this huge burden on their children, like they got to do something for them. Like, I didn't make it. If you make it, can you please carry me? And I think a lot of it, you talk to a lot of people, when I mentor a lot of people, they're always, I want to be successful so I can help my family. I want to be successful for this. And one of the things that I just laid down is that ultimately, that's not how success works. For me in the universe, it's kind of like you're setting up in your psyche because you're embarrassed to say that you want to succeed for yourself. So you're making these things like, I want to succeed for my family. I want to see that. And that could be a part of the end result. But initially, you need to succeed for yourself. Yeah. Ultimately, you need to succeed for yourself, right? If you can't succeed for yourself, it ain't going to work. Because at the end of the day, I give an example. I wanted to kind of give this example, and then we're going to roll it out. Imagine you carrying a backpack, and you got to walk to school, say, half a mile. And in that backpack, I drop you a 5-pound weight. Well, you might get there and notice like, well, shit, my walk was a little bit too much, right? But imagine the next morning I drop you a 10-pound weight. And then I drop you a 15-pound weight. Then I drop you a 25-pound weight. What if the point I drop you a 45-pound weight and you're walking and you break your ankle or your body gives out or something happens because there was too much weight, too much of a burden placed on you?
Right.
But the crazy part is in life, in mental burdens, our mind is like a backpack, but it's our choice to keep them in the backpack, or are we taking this stuff out and dumping it out? Are we dumping our backpack, or are we fucking walking with the weight in our backpack, right? So I was talking to this individual, and they're talking about like how they feel, especially a lot of my friends that are immigrants. They feel like they owe their family so much because they crossed over, and well, I got to do this for my mom, and I'm like, well, what choices have your mom made? And the mom's made a lot of bad choices, and they're like in the negative. And I'm like, well, you're actually putting yourself a lot of grief that doesn't really need to be there. So that mental burden then carries over physically. It starts to affect your physical. You guys have any examples, any friends, anything you guys want to share about that? Kind of a mental burden on my basis?
I don't have much examples, but I have a funny scenario that you kind of touched on that I like to say is that I think a thing too where you brought it up and you said people are almost too afraid to have their reason for wanting to succeed in life. And I agree with that 100% because I'll meet people, right? And they're like, oh, I want to get into real estate because I have a passion for certain things. And it's like, well, and then they hear my reason, right? And I'm like, well, I was never in elementary school saying, yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a real estate agent. I just knew they made a lot of money. You didn't need a degree. If you worked hard, you reaped the reward, and that's what it was. And people are like, oh, well, mine's actually the same too. And it's like, okay, so what happened to all this other stuff? And the thing that I don't like about, the way people say things today is they're like, you have to find a deep why, because that's going to be the motive for your success. And I agree with that. And I don't agree with that because everyone's different. Like for me, I really don't have a deep why, and I don't go that deep into things. That I set small goals and short-term goals, right? If I say, I want this pair of shoes, or I want this car, or I want this big house, or I want a bunch of rentals, or I want this stuff. That's what my why helps me to get. And a lot of these personal development speakers and things like that are telling these kids, like, your why has to be so deep. Like, you want to impact generations of people and this and that. And for me, I'm like, why would I want to impact generations of people if I'm going to be dead anyway? I'm not going to be here. So I'm supposed to, you know what I mean? But I get what they're trying to say, but that's the only thing that I have to say on, kind of dead weight or burden. It's kind of do things more for yourself. And like I've said on the past episodes before, is I've hit a time last year where it was more so me doing things for myself just to build my business and not being selfish in a sense, but making sure that I have certain goals that I want to get to and not right now worrying about, other individuals' goals that I have to help them get to. But it's also a fine line because the more people you do help, the more you do succeed. So
But
I'm
there's a
more
big-
into refining and pouring time into certain individuals, not, where you're going there and putting time into everyone, and then you're just spinning your wheels. You know what I mean? So
I think you're saying
it's both lines.
are there other people that mentally weigh you down, right? Weigh you down
Yeah,
as far
yeah.
as a burden?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there are some people in my life that can they can love you, but then they can also be your maybe your worst enemy too.
Yeah,
and
true.
literally they can crush you. They can. And just because they have expectations or even antiquated ways of thinking, like I got scolded for posting something on my Facebook, and my mom's like, can you not use inappropriate language? Because I said TikTok motherfucker.
Oh
I
yeah,
put that picture.
I've done that. I had a family member call me a racist.
Yeah, no. So, but that's, to me, that's a mental burden because, like, number one, I don't do it all the time, and it bothered me, and I just said thanks, and I didn't want to get into a huge argument.
Right,
but to me, that was a mental burden of saying, okay, well, here's my generational attitude towards something, accept it and do it.
Mhm.
And it's just, I won't even get into that argument, or even the way that I raise my kids, like, my youngest son, he's probably the worst about it. He'll let F words and stuff slip and stuff like that, just because he's used to just bullshitting with his friends online with headphones, and and he cusses without thinking, and it really infuriates my mother. And and I'm like, why don't you care about that? And I said, well, I care about their grades, and I care about I place. I lose my shit.
You prioritize
in
things.
different
Yeah,
ways.
Exactly. I'm the same way.
You're
too.
gonna have to find this. There's an actual study that showed that people that cuss a lot are actually more legit. It's something like that was a big study, right? That they're more truthful because at the end of the day, and I think a lot of things you're talking about is that's what I'm talking about, is that we can let generational mental burdens get on us where we're like freaked out to talk about anything, right? And I really
that's
think
the problem.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what
Yeah.
I'm saying, and what I said earlier is that it's like people want to put a filter on certain things, and I can't lie. Even sometimes we're on the podcast, I'm like, oh, I better not say what I really want to say.
don't get scared, Winston.
But,
don't get scared, dude. Just lay it down.
Hey, we got to get on iTunes. So
That's why it's called The Truth. Yeah, you know what Winston's scared? He wants us so we could edit it, dude. In case he gets in there.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to lay it like the Jen. I just go hard, dude.
No, the Jen hides a lot too.
No, I don't hide,
out
dude.
there too. He says things different on the podcast sometimes. But anyways, I'll catch myself still like kind of filtering things, because it's like we want to get through to certain people, and the only reason I could say I feel we kind of do at some points is because certain people don't understand certain ways we relate information, right? If their beliefs are this, and you're saying something that can help that individual, but you have to say it a different way to get through to them. And then if you say it a certain way, then they're like, oh, screw this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it's like, no, it's still the same fundamentals that we talk about in every episode, right? We're not recreating the wheel.
Yeah.
It's just we have to say it in different ways to get through to different individuals.
Yeah.
But I want to share this,
But see, I see that as a mental burden on me. I mean, because now that, like I said, there's very few things that bother me, but those are like mental burdens that I'm like, oh God,
But see, John, the thing
that's
is
the way of
about
bringing
you.
down my day.
I think like sitting with your mom, I think social media is one of those things that stuff, right? Too, like the podcast. And what I really think the podcast and social media and all that is really, we're laying out our platform. And I think you got to kind of talk to your mom and say, look, Mom, this is social media and I'm laying my views to the masses. It's not to you. And I think if you want to tune into it, you have a choice to click on it or not.
Yeah.
Versus we're sitting with our grandma.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not, I fucking cuss a shitload.
Yeah.
But what's funny? Everyone teases me and says, man, an old lady walks in or someone from the church, all of a sudden now one word comes out of you. It's a respecting, right?
Yeah.
But you got to know your audience. And I think when you're on social media, we're on the podcast, you're choosing to tune in to our platform.
Yeah.
And you got to understand, say, this is my social media. This is my thing. And so if you're going to tune in, you're going to see a lot of weird shit, but you're setting that standard, right, John? I think.
Yeah.
And so I think, let me tell you something a little bit I was share about mental anguish and why I don't think I had this growing up. So I looked at my mom, how she was raised versus my dad. And I look a lot with my dad, his family put that burden like, you got to help your parents. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to give your parents this much money. And it was like a lot of burden, right? I think it put a lot of burden early on in their marriage when they were younger. But then you look at the way my mom was raised, and my mom was kind of like, go out there, make your own living, help your parents, like if they need them, like in the physical aspect, take them to the doctor, do this. But there wasn't like that monetary burden. And I think that's kind of bullshit because that's really not what it's supposed to be, right? Like when you look at it in life, you put into something because you want it to gain, obviously, and if there's going to be an opportunity, but you can't put those kind of mental burdens on people, right? Or where it's their idea and they're like, you're not in with me on this. And I'm like, no, not really, because I got so much shit going on in my life. I really can't be worried about your shit. You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that's one thing I really respect my cousin about. You know, I got a cousin up north. He's a fucking badass. He's literally a level of a test scientist. And he just goes by the beat of his own drum, period, right? He doesn't care. He doesn't fall into the stuff. The guy could buy a truck. He buy all that at one shot. But he just does what he wants. And it's funny because he does beat by his own drum. Those are the things I'm talking about, right? He doesn't allow those mental burdens. But I think we saw so many people growing up with those mental burdens and like, oh, Hito, you're going to have to do this for me. And I'm like, no, fuck no, right? You know, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, Shaq talked about how he blew $1 million because he felt because he bought himself a car, he had to buy one for his dad of the same car. And he blew $1 million immediately. Mm-hmm. And then he was like, oh, shit, I blew $1 million. That's what I'm talking about. And so I'm more of a, and you know, people get all pissed off at me when they hear this. Me, it's like, what did you do to get yourself for the situation you are?
Yeah.
So you're making yourself a fucking burden. I'm not going to allow you to become a burden on me.
For the decisions they made.
Yeah, because that's bullshit, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I've seen a lot, especially in New Mexico. I'm going to say a lot of places. I'm just saying New Mexico. Where you got parents that have made such bad decisions.
It's a human condition.
Yeah, they're alcoholics. They're drug addicts. They didn't pay the fucking mortgage. That's something you're talking about before we got on the podcast. And all of a sudden they expect the kid or the son or daughter to step in and bail him out. And then all of a sudden the son and daughter are going to get a divorce because the son-in-law or the daughter-in-law is like, what the fuck? And that's what's crazy, right? And so to me, it's like you got to break sometimes those mental burdens or those cultural burdens that are not going to benefit you. And you got to be
definitely.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I go down to that balance portion of it is this burden going to break you? But this is what the piece that I'm trying to get here today.
It's even the opposite way too. I've seen it. I had a conversation with someone today, and we were talking about how the kids try riding the coattails of the parents still, and it's like they still have
the silver spoons
enjoy their life too. You know, you're becoming, but it's the same thing, and it goes both ways.
I mean, you know this. You know, my niece might be listening out there. She's gonna be pissed, but that's all right because she knows I love her and I take care of her. But I used to tell her a long time ago, your burden is not my burden. And now she's grown up and they're done well. But she'd say, you know what, Uncle Jack, he loves you hard. Like it's the hard love. You know, so I'm like more of that hard lover kind of guy.
Tough
right?
love,
that's tough. But I'm gonna be there when the shit hits the fan. Like if you need me, I'm there. But I can't have that burden. If you're over there like, well, I can't pay the mortgage, but you got 2 razors. I got to be like, fuck, dude, there's an issue going on. You know what I'm trying to tell you? Yeah. And I think one of the things, those mental burdens start a lot, and I've seen this a lot. I've seen these mental burdens happen where a lot with the kids that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I had an uncle, and he was very successful. And then his kids were kind of like sleepy poo. And they were expecting, well, you know what? You bought yourself a brand new freaking Camaro Super Sport. How come I don't have a Camaro Super Sport? And I'd be there like, are you smoking, dude? Yeah. The guy fucking works ridiculous hours. Mm-hmm. Why does he have to buy you a Camaro Super Sport? You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah.
And it's like that whole stuff. And I can't even imagine like how it is with what we're talking about is when someone earns more than the other in relationships or your spouse, you really have to lay out those lines so that mental burden's not on the back of your head. And it's going to cause all kinds of savage bullshit, right? Because they say the number one reason for divorce is money problems.
Monetary, yeah.
Number one. I can't remember what study I saw that on.
That's why I'm gonna split everything. What's yours is yours. What's mine is mine. Done deal.
What do they call that? Soul and separate, right?
Prenup.
No. It's a soul and separate. Prenup, you still get. You gotta get. It's heavy. Soul and separate, but you gotta go to the soul and separate. But I think that mental burden. Think about this. I think in today's society, that's why you see a lot of professionals. Professionals like doctors because they know, well, shit, I'm gonna be in the ER for this much time and that, so they know that the time of not being able to spend each other is that mental burden is eliminated because they know how much work it is, right?
Right.
It's a freaking pain in the ass.
Yeah, and then at the same time, we can play the other side too and say, well, you know, if you're feeling that that's something you have to do, then that's a decision you have to make, because as well, the other person on that side is a grown individual too. And I bring that up because there's times where, you know, I feel like I want to give back to my parents just because of what they had done for me, right? So I'll take them on trips. Last year we went to Disneyland for Christmas, and you know, we did certain things like that. Or I bought my mom a Chanel bag, and that was something she always wanted. But it was never like a burden for me. It was something, yeah,
or you felt obliged to do. Yeah,
exactly. It was something that I said, okay, I know I worked hard and done this, but for me, it was like, this is worth it to bring the joy, or you know what I mean, to do these certain things. So there's a fine line, and you got to be very cautious of things you're doing.
But this is what she didn't expect that of you.
Exactly.
There wasn't an expectation.
Right.
So you can't have a burden unless there's an expectation. Mm-hmm. So if I come over here and we all sit down together, and I'm like, you know what? I'll buy Big John a burger. Okay, Winston, you're getting a burger. We're here. That's not an expectation.
Yeah.
But
that's what I'm saying. You know, it's nice to where, and that's where I want to clear it for our listeners, because I already know how people can take this discussion, is to where, is it something that the people expect and you feel like you're obligated to do? Right?
Yes.
So it's like, I never felt obligated to get. My mom's always type. She's like, don't get me anything for Christmas. She gets a little grumpy. I tell her, you're a little grumpy. We got you something, you know. But we do it because we want to, and she does appreciate it. But she's always honest, like, don't get anything for me. Get for yourself. You know, do things for yourself. So that's what I mean and that makes me want to go and reward them more for certain things instead of like, where's this? And how come you have all this money and you bought this thing, but what about what we're getting? And then that's a different story. You know what I mean?
That's the thing I got to say about my mom. Like, I used to try to, my mom was a very independent woman. And it's so funny, even when she passed away, she paid for everything. And she's like, I don't want anybody to say that they paid anything for me. She was that kind of a lady, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to tease her. I said, Mom, you're listening to heaven, but you know what? I had to pay $54 for the taxes because they changed. But that's just a joke, right? But when you look at that, it's freaking awesome when, like, I was blessed to be able to have a mother like that and a father that was just like, you know what?
Yeah.
You get out there, you make your own, son. We're going to take care of our own. We can't help you too much because we're taking care of our own. And I can respect that. I said, don't worry. We're going to come in like two horses running the race. And I think that's what's freaking awesome, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited about, you know, that's kind of excites me.
Yeah.
And then, you know, even mental burdens and friendships. I mean, some people are in there trying to create a mental burden, like, I want all this time from you, or can you solve my issues, or kind of like what you're talking about. Yeah. And they want you to freaking make the move, but they're not even taking the first steps.
Oh,
that's bullshit, right?
Well, I've had friends in the past, and you know, I try to help people and do certain things, and I'm like, okay, here's the fundamentals, and then if they don't do it, I'm like, well, sorry. And you know, some people have gotten a little mad at me because I don't go like, come on. But I'm like, I had to make every single decision for myself to be in the position that I'm in today, and just like anyone else, I hold everyone accountable. And that's why a lot of times people don't like that I'm like this. But I was like Michael Jordan said in The Last Dance. He said him and Charles Barkley pulled up to a stoplight, and there's a homeless man there, right? And Charles was like, how come you're not going to give him any money? He's like, that guy could be at McDonald's right now flipping a cheeseburger. Why am I going to give him any money just because he wants a free handout, you know? And that's kind of how I am in certain situations. I know certain people can't help the situation they're in at times, but most of the time they can. You know what I mean? Like, there's a speaker that's got no limbs and no arms, and he's working out still, and it's like, is it a will, or is it just, you know, a decision? You know what I mean?
You know that one's a tough one. I think, like, where I'm at in my life, you know, that question you talk about. Yeah. And I can't speak for MJ because he made his own money. I'm at the point in my life, like, if I pull up,
that was Charles' attitude, not mine.
Yeah, it was Charles. It was Charles.
Was it Charles'
attitude?
It
was Michael Jordan. It
was Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Because I would see Charles having that attitude.
Yeah, so I think, like, where I'm at,
Charles was wanting to give the money to the homeless man, and he said Mike slapped it out of his hand.
Maybe like, Charles is always hungry too. So
yeah, but I think in my situation where I'm at in my life, I'll just give the money. I don't really give a shit. You know, like, where I'm at, I think to myself, am I being tested? Am I doing this? And so when I look up to it and I think, you know what, dude, like, if I give you $20, is it really gonna break my fucking bank? Not really. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could go around and give fucking 100 times $20 to people on the road, and it actually makes me feel good, John. You know what's fun, crazy about me? I'll pull up to a homeless guy and I say, hey, what's up? And then I'll make him, before COVID and that, I used to shake his hand. And you should see, like, what he would get in his eyes, right? So for me, it was worth that.
Because normally they're invisible.
Yeah, I give them that humanization.
They're treated like they're invisible.
Things like that.
But it's, man, what was it? Gannon's junior year. Yeah, Gannon's junior year in high school. My oldest son, we took in a kid that he's never had parents. Mom's a schizophrenic. Dad's a drug dealer on the streets of LA, and the kids bounced around from home to home, and now he's very much schizophrenic. And just recently, he like literally showed up at my parents' house, sleeping in our RV. Didn't even know he was in town.
Way.
Yeah, and freaked the shit out of my parents.
Yeah.
But he didn't know where else to go. He walked 14 miles in the dark from Rio Rancho, the UNM hospital out there by in Cleveland district, to Edith and Alameda.
Jeez.
At like 2 a.m. Feet bleeding, from walking 14 miles with no water or whatever. And that's not even a immense struggle that some people go through, but that was just his situation. And for a while there, I'm like, well, nobody else is going to take him, and I've seen the struggles of even just somebody like him, know. But I also understand from a social studies perspective, there's going to be a certain percentage that, even though there's a huge a big percentage of people that are lazy and just want to take advantage of things.
That's one thing I always remember from what you've taught is there always are people that have to dig the ditch, and there's people that it's just the way the system works.
Exactly.
And it's unfortunate to say, right? Yeah. But it's just the truth, and that's why we couldn't
function if everybody was successful.
Exactly.
But I think from your perspective, John, is that at the end of the day, there is those people that I believe are sick and they need our help.
Or realize that there's and I don't know if you remember me telling you this in class. Mark my words, there'll never be a day where they go on the news and say there is a zero unemployment, because our system wouldn't function.
There has to be unemployment.
There has to be people without jobs for the system to function. So you talk about the real estate market right now and the supply being so low. Imagine if that were jobs. Now employees could say, you know what, fuck you, pay me $30 an hour. Because you can't replace me.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know if you guys heard this. Did you see the announcement? Exactly. Walmart is their minimum wage is going to be $30 an hour.
Really?
What?
Yeah, read it up.
Walmart
made an announcement.
Because I know they're trying to move. It hasn't been raised in 13 years.
They're moving it. I mean, Walmart's making a move. But one of the things that I think what companies are going to is that, and I've done kind of this high level.
People in the freaking lanes then.
You know what that's a signal for. Oh, look. Yeah. To raise.
But you see what they're going to do? This makes a lot more sense. So let me tell you what I've done. I've gone to a high wage, and I'm trying to get away from you got to cover your own shit. Figure your life. Mm-hmm. So if you think your health's worth something, pay for it. Yeah. So I'm just going to give you a high ass wage.
Yeah.
So you walk around, I pay you $40 an hour. Don't matter to me. Yeah. You got to figure it out.
Like a contractor.
What's that?
Like a contractor.
Yeah, treating him like a subcontractor.
No, not even. I can't because I'm at the size that I'm at, so I got to have you as an employee. Yeah. But at the end of the day, instead of me figuring shit out, you still when you do your taxes, you still can deduct your health insurance, all that stuff personally.
Yeah.
So I'm putting the burden on. Excuse me, I'm putting the burden on the individual.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, fuck it. You know what? I'm gonna give you the high wage. Here it is. I've gotten to hourly. There's no more fucking salaries. Do your shit. You put your time.
That's how Fidelity was with me too.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because
sign up on your own if you wanted insurance or 401k, retirement, any of that stuff.
Yeah, there's no more sitting, waiting the meeting. You should do this because I think it's good for you. And then people are like, that's not good for me. The big man's trying to take me, and I thought it doesn't make no fucking sense.
Yeah.
And then it's taking a lot of mental burden out of me because that's what I'm going to. Just, you know what? You're getting, if you go and you blow at rock star status and you're 60 years old and you're looking at me and saying, fuck, no, I wasn't your dad. Yeah. You can never sit back and say, holy shit, he didn't pay me a lot. No, he didn't. I don't want to babysit. I think, you know what's crazy for
That's the thing. Everyone's got decisions, you know what I mean? And you're responsible for your own actions.
But they used to put a lot of burden on corporations for us to make good decisions to help employees for the end, and that's fucking bullshit. I'm at the point, I'm not going to like Walmart. And so like I told you, like at the end of the day, people got to take responsibility for their own lives unless you're a child or you're mentally ill or you do that. That's where I'm with, no matter what anyone tells me, that's where we need that program for those individuals.
That's where a Christian's supposed to be.
Yeah. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
so
why
what would Jesus do part of Christianity versus the prosperity doctrine?
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck everybody else.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I'm talking about. And so I think that sometimes we in our minds are fucking getting burdens mistaken with something that we're making up in our head. So like that situation, that's not a burden. You went out there, you're doing it, but making the wrong decision and you're helping that individual over and over and over again. They don't want to do shit.
Yeah.
They could become your fucking burden. Now it's a disaster. Right?
Exactly.
And I've been in that position. I've been where I've helped people where I'm like, holy shit, I'm putting in a shitload into this and I ain't getting anything out of it. And what I mean, but I'm not getting anything out of it. I mean, that individual ain't doing nothing. So they're like, this is great. He's just solving my problems.
Right.
Forget that shit. Everyone has to be putting in time to get somewhere. Does that make sense?
Nothing's free in this world.
Nothing's free. Nothing's free. So let's touch on
Physical burdens.
physical burdens, right? Let's give an example of a physical burden and what is that really there. So a physical burden, let's talk about the money aspect, right? Are we putting on burdens that are unnecessary? Buying the house that's too big for us and now we got a fucking mortgage that's too much and now we can't get all the right food. So we can't get the right medicine. We're now have made these deals with the devil that I call them. And now you're feeding your house, but you can't get the right shoes. And so now you're putting yourself a physical burden. So monetary and physical go together because they're subatomic. We can touch them. We can feel them, that resource. And how many people do you guys know out there that are putting for themselves, making financial burdens for themselves? I mean, how many people do you guys know?
A lot.
Shitload, right? You guys got an example?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I can't drop names, but
You know, the drop names, we can drop examples.
I've had a lot of people push ratios on getting houses to extremes just to get the house, you know. But that's what they want. And you know, I have on the same opposite end people who don't want to, and they're like, yeah, even though although we can afford this property, at the same time we still like to go on vacations and you know put our kids in club teams and do this and that. So that's exactly what it is kind of where your priorities at for your physical burden, because just like we talked about last week, it kind of leads to that ripple effect of things, right? When you have one thing that's sucking everything in, what are you left with? And also, where is that time and money being spent? You know what I mean? On what's important.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation me and you have had tons of times to where you have to plant your seeds in the right areas or else you're going to be screwed. You'll be eating bologna sandwiches.
Look, I got to tell you guys a fucking, you know, I'm all statistics. I'm trying like John over here. I read all kinds of shit, right? So in the time when the stimulus checks came out, the numbers that went up the skyrocket was Neiman Marcus and Gucci. The majority of people's fucking stimulus checks in Los Angeles were spent on Gucci belts and Gucci attire.
Oh.
Think about that. Because the average big purchase is about between $1,500 and $2,000. And so these people were fucking killing it. Talk about stimulating I call it the Italian market, right? So their number one thing was, I'm going to do this, but not knowing your responsibilities. So now you're potentially setting yourself up for a big burden.
Yeah.
I'll give you guys my for me personally, right? Anytime I've ever gotten stressed out of my life is when I have not managed the money to where I call it general's level. We're not talking regular human level, we're talking general level. And I like to be so fluid that I want to be able to make any decision anytime and it doesn't affect me. So it's kind of, I talk about have you guys ever been in the ocean on multiple level style boats? If you're in a small boat, when you feel a small wave, you feel everything, dude. You're like one with the fucking ocean, right? You get to like a fishing boat, you still feel it. Holy shit, it's strong, it cuts it, but you're like up and down, people are sick. Then you start to get, say like yacht, and then the yacht's like, okay, you can't really feel it. Then you get to a fucking cruise liner or even a monster, a mega yacht you call, and you don't feel shit. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you don't create yourself a fucking burden because you're on a small ship. You're making these bad decisions, and you have to understand for yourself what in my life will cause me these type of emotional or physical or monetary burdens that are going to affect me mentally and physically, tying it together, right? Because I've always told you guys, wherever the mind goes, the body follows.
That's why a lot of things we'll put an example too. When you would buy things, right? And I'd be like, you have a full tank still, the needle barely went. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We would relate it to that. So I always like to relate that to how full your gas tank is in your car, right? And when you go out and buy certain things, how much is that taking away from your full tank? Because realistically, you never want to go below a half tank, because then if you do, then you can start affecting the fuel pump in the car, right? So I think of it, that's the way I like to think of things. and kind of put it into an image perspective for me. And as far as when you're going to go, you never want to dip below that half of your full tank, right? Whether it's the balance in your account or your retirement or whatever the case, you never want to dip below that half. You always want to keep it there and fill it up, the same way you would a car.
But mental energy is that way too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, even physical, but I mean, the physical burden, I think people can also, they can start to destroy themselves with their health, and they, maybe they bring on, what is it, type 2 diabetes that's induced on by your behavior, so I think those are some of the physical burdens that people
if you're
can
stressed out on that mentally, then just like
or
Jack said, it follows,
or you mean, you look at people who are maybe super successful in business, but they don't have a way to deal with stress, and those are the ones that are killing over from heart attacks from stress induced.
Absolutely.
So I think those are physical burdens that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think, John, there's some physical burdens that we have that we didn't choose, right? Like you look at Aiden, Carson's nephew. I mean, he was born with type 1 diabetes, and that's a fucking burden. But the thing is about it, that type of burden, you just have to deal with it, right? That's what I'm talking. That's a different animal.
Oh, absolutely. Things that wasn't in his control.
Correct. Non-choice burdens, you got to just deal with them. And so if you're born to a circumstance, you just got to fucking deal with it. That's a bullshit burden, but you can get past that. That's what I call more of a storm, right? That's a storm that you're going to be able to get through, or you're going to have to weather. You're either going to be able to get through it, or you're going to have to weather. The burden we're focused, we're bringing in self-proclaimed prophecy to ourselves. Like we know what affects us. We're like, no, I'm going to do it this once. We're going to come here and then just right. You bought the car like in the house, and then you can't go on the vacation, or you fucking need psychological help. And
or
you
it's
can't.
the same thing, like I said, where I've brought in people into the business and they're late for open houses, or they're not answering the phones, and we're losing money, and sellers end up getting pissed because that agent you had that you said was going to be there at that time was late. So then you lose the listing. Then that starts affecting your entire lifestyle, right? Because if your business is going down, in my aspect, let's say if that were to happen and I were to keep pouring into these people and they keep doing the same thing, then that becomes a disaster for me. My brand gets killed, my name gets killed. No one thinks I have any.
It hurts your credibility and your reputation.
Everything.
So let's think about this, right? Let's sum this up. So now that burden became a detriment. How fucked up and crazy is that, right? That burden became a detriment. So is it becoming mental anguish, or is it becoming a detriment? So physically it became a detriment because your brand screwed. Now you're taking money out of your pocket. That work you lost. So that's a physical detriment.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about, right?
Exactly.
So Aiden doesn't take his medication, or he doesn't watch the diet. He's going to have a fucking end result that's not a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The detriment could be you could lose a leg, you could lose your eyesight. I mean, that's just plain and simple. But what I'm talking about for us, do we want to bring self-proclaimed burdens into our life where our mind says it's type 1 diabetes, but it's really type 2? And I'm glad you brought that up, John, because ultimately you're carrying along these burdens that really ain't going to bring you any positivity, but you're self-inducing them to yourself. It ain't the type 1, it's the type 2. And I love that analogy right there. So people can do is say, look around your life, listeners, sitting down in your life, and you think about what you stress out the most. Ask yourself the question, is this thing a type 1 or is it a type 2? Is it something that I can't get rid of? It's God gave it to me, or it's an ailment.
Yeah.
Or did I actually choose to put up with this bullshit? Right.
Brought it upon yourself.
Yeah.
Upon yourself.
And there's one quote. I've been watching Star Wars like crazy lately. Ever since Mandalorian came out, I've been like a whole Star Wars nerd, following the whole thing. But I forget what Yoda says. Maybe you'll know, John. But he's talking to Anakin, and he's like, "There's things that you have to do." And he says, "Caring for someone eventually leads to jealousy, or something like that." And he basically says, "Everything you fear to lose, you need to let go of." Is the way of the Jedi, right? And that's saying certain things too, to where it's like there are things that you may feel you need to do, or there are those burdens, and realistically you just need to let go of them.
You know, it's crazy. That's actually a Buddhist principle. What Yoda was talking about. That's a Buddhist principle. And so today I fucking was in a rush and I forgot this. So what I was going to bring today was, and I want you guys to analyze this, I was going to bring a quarter, a solid dollar, a silver coin, and a 1 ounce gold coin. And the theme today was about would you carry any one of these coins And if you lost it, how would it make you feel?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
If I lost a quarter, I'd be like, oh, fuck it. If I lost the $1 coin, I'd be fuck it. If I lost the $1 silver ounce coin that's really $50 or $30, how would I feel? But if I lost the 1 ounce, $25 coin that's really $2,000, how would that make me feel? And it's crazy you said that about the Jedi, because I'm thinking about that, putting it in my pocket, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm not gonna like it, but if I lost any one of those coins, I wouldn't care. But I mean, I would care, but it's not ultimately gonna create anguish, and I'm not gonna be all affected in my mind, like beating myself up, right? And so then I asked myself, well, how big of a coin would I have to be carrying in my pocket to piss myself, like where it would be like, fuck, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that, and I thought, wow, but then I was thinking, I'm not really attached to anything. And it's weird, right? So I got to tell you guys a funny story. You're going to laugh your ass off. This is a fucking true story. So I misplaced my backpack, right? And it's one of those Vegas backpacks. And I misplaced 2 loaves, right? That's $200,000. And I'm in there like, what the fuck? Where did I put this? I can't find it. And this. And then, it's so crazy. This is a 100% true statement. I chalked it up and I was like, nah, fuck it. And I wasn't like attached to it. But it's weird because as a child, I was so used to loss, like either losing something that was my favorite. So I became really unattached to everything. Mm-hmm. And then through my training, my martial arts training, and then my military training, I really became so honed in where I'm not really attached a lot. Like it's gonna, like I'm like, don't get me wrong, it may bother you, but it's now where it's like, oh my God, and you're beating the shit out of yourself and life ends and you're just like, your whole mental state's going down. But the one thing that I learned from myself is what am I really attached to, right? And what's crazy is I'm really attached to my mental freedom. I'm really attached to my mental freedom because I really like to be like mellow yellow cat. You know what I'm trying to say? Me and Michael were talking one day and he says, you're probably you are the most controlled individual that I know. Like nothing sets you off. He says, but if you are being set off, like, holy shit, it's got to be made. He's like, me, I'm mellow. Like I'm mellow by nature. He says, you're not mellow. You're just controlled. And I had never processed it like that in my mind. And I said, I've actually been using the word incorrectly because I'm not mellow, but I'm controlled. But in my mind, I got mellow. So when I tell people that I'm mellow, they're looking at me like, you're fucking crazy, dude. You're not mellow. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah.
But I was misusing the word. I think that's what I'm trying to talk about today.
Yeah, but you can also measure what type of burdens do you have in your life, and that's just it. Is you don't have those. You don't have kids, so that's not a burden that just every fucking day where you're like, shit, I got to feed them fucking again. And, you don't have those things, and those good and bad. You probably admit, but right now you're in a good place because you don't see those type of mental or even physical burdens that we put upon ourselves or some people
too early.
Yeah, or where they're not.
But let's think about it, John. Let's think about it right now, right? Say I had a kid.
Yeah.
And I had a kid right now. Like the thought of me feeding him doesn't even come to mind because the resources that I have, it wouldn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. But let's think about when I was 25.
Oh, yeah, it'd make a big difference.
Holy shit, dude! I'd have been
probably wouldn't be sitting in the chair you're in, right?
But
no doubt.
But you might have been. I've seen people. Joe's done it.
Yeah,
he had kids and he freaking kills it. So that's another thing too. Where is that burden really a type 1 or a type 2? Because,
but that wasn't his destiny. Like he wanted that. Like when you talk to Joe, when I knew him a lot earlier in life. Like everyone talked about that, it's so crazy. He'd be like, dude, I'm gonna give me the chick with the kids and the white picket fence, and I like that, you know what I mean? And me, I was like, no, I'm more the Miami Vice guy. I want to be like Mr. Cool, you know what I mean? And so, like for me, that wasn't what I wanted. But so if it comes early and you deal with it, that's like saying, Carson, you know what? I was fucking 25 and then I won the lottery and I got a Lambo. Now I got to put the gas and insurance and I'm dealing with that burden. It's not really a fucking burden. My dream came a little earlier because that's what you actually wanted in the future. Yeah. So you kind of came earlier than you wanted.
Sure.
But I think if you're out there and you're a guy and you're screwing off and you have a mistake and you're like, fuck, I had a one night stand and now this chick's pregnant. Well, fuck, that's going to be a heavy one, right? You see what I'm trying to tell you? Or even a female. It's a little different, but I think, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to give it to you straight. I would have had that. I don't think I'd be where I am right now. I'm just going to be as straight honest. focus, like this is not throwing any, I'm not throwing you guys down, I'm telling you.
Mhm.
Engineering and real estate are two fucking different animals.
Yeah, for sure.
The amount of focus that I have to put in and the amount that it takes in and the error factor for fucking something to fall apart is fucking crazy, right?
Mhm.
So there's no way, because I know that I put too much energy, and so I don't want to put. I'd be like John. I was thinking about this, and I thought, what kind of dad would I be? I said, I'd be definitely like John. They'd be like, fuck, he's on the kid's ass, right? No, this, that, the other. So it's that whole case of I can't create two masters.
Yeah.
And so I would have been fucked up, because you know what I would have done? I wouldn't have wanted to work late. So I'd have been like, I gotta get this, because when I listen to John, I'm thinking, should I resonate just like what he's talking about? I'd be like, well, son, what's going on? I'm not learning in math. Fuck, I'd be there in the classroom. I'd be that parent, like, do I want to sit in the back of the classroom? Absolutely. I want to sit in the back of the classroom and see what's going on. I'm not going to make a noise. You can't do the line of business that I want to do if you want to be that kind of a parent.
Yeah. Oh,
No,
no.
I get you.
Well, I look at it. I could, if I didn't have a teaching job,
Because that
if
would be
I-
your
if I-
priority, is what you're saying. Sorry, John,
Exactly.
but I'm just like
No,
turning my wheels to
Oh,
what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah. No,
So
yeah.
that would be your priority,
Yeah.
not your business. You know what I mean? And that's
So-
a lot of things I tell people too. And they're like, oh, you want to have kids. And I'm like, honestly, I don't, as it stands right now, I don't want
Not
kids.
yet.
But maybe when
Not
I'm
yet.
40, I'm
Yeah.
going to be like Jay-Z, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
and there's, and
when
there's-
I get
and
there.
there's nothing. And to me, I wish we would go. To me, the greatest invention we could ever have is to prevent human beings from having them till at least till they're 30.
Yeah.
Just because I just don't. I mean, number one, our minds don't fully develop till the age of 25.
Mhm.
So raising a kid when you're 16, 17, 18 years old,
Yeah.
there are aberrations and kids that become successful, but the statistics say it just doesn't happen.
Mhm.
You're going to put that kid down the same path. And, so, yeah, you can't.
Look
There's
at
just
me.
only so many seeds that you can put into that garden. It either has to be to your bit. And that's what, from my own personal perspective, that's why my kids flourish so much, because every summer I didn't work in the
Yeah.
summer.
You're there.
I know,
And you
because
had-
I
you
was
had that time
coaching
to do it
baseball,
too.
coaching soccer, coaching football,
Yeah.
teaching them to do things, doing all these things. But if I had to punch an hourly clock like normal,
Mhm.
there's no way I would have been
It
able
would
to
be
do
totally different.
It would be.
It would be totally different. And that's
It
why
would
you
be.
see a lot of kids, their dads are always at work. Or they really don't.
Mhm.
If their dad's really rich, right, then they don't even see their dad. They think the maid is their
Oh yeah.
parent,
Oh, I know.
and things
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
definitely.
And it's like, that's real stuff. And you kind of have to, it all boils back to the same thing I love to say. You can't have the donuts and have the
But let's
success
do
at the
this.
same
So
time.
let's reverse that thought process. And so this is where I'm going to disagree with you on that one. There's the balance principle, right? The balance goes down to the Buddhist. I got this big thing I wrote for you guys that I want to show you. So let's give this example, right? Let's say you get high in your career and you marry the right woman. I'm going to use my example. Nikki said this. I took her up to Penasco. We all went. He was there. We had to pick some stuff up. And she says, you know what? You weren't born. You were bred. I showed her how I grew up, how my mom made my room, how she had me structured, the fucking encyclopedias and stuff, right? And my mom was 29 years old when she had me. Think about that. That's crazy,
Mhm.
right?
Oh yeah.
29 years old,
Mhm.
and my dad was 36 years old. And my dad was already established in Los Alamos versus like my brother, where they were like from job to job.
But
And-
even that pure fact alone, I guarantee, gave you a better advantage. Because
Beyond-
more
beyond.
mature parents,
Absolutely.
more established parents, financially probably be able to
Absolutely.
give you things that a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, a
Can't do it.
21-year-old parent couldn't do. That I completely agree.
Well, it's funny because my dad says, I remember when I go to school and he says, what's the prerequisite? And I said, well, Dad, and he's told you this, Carson. He laughs and he's like, he would say, this cabroncito, he lied to me. He says, I told him that I need a set of shoes for school, I need a set of shoes for gym, and I need a set of shoes for basketball. And so this is first of the year, end of the year. And, I was a little fucker. I wasn't going to get the small Nikes. And so I had a set of Jordans for basketball. I had a set of Boomer Esiasons for gym class. And then I had a set, I can't remember what the other shoe was. It was a Reebok pump for the regular school, right? And so I put my dad up to $350 at the time.
Oh yeah.
They were like 110 at the time, which
Which was
the
a lot back then.
right. And so I thought about this, and he says, you know what, son? When your brother was going to school and he wanted wrestling, he says, we really had to make concessions and be like, fuck, we're not going to do this in order to get his gear. And I didn't want that for you going on. And he says, this is what I wanted. So when I look at that, and so when I look at what the statement you made, I'm a kid. I want my dad to be able to bring the house. And if you choose the right woman, your mother can raise the kids and then take them to basketball practice, this and that. So you got a team, right? And then so in basketball, guards are not the ones playing centers. They're never going to fucking be successful at it. And the center's not playing guard. And that's what I'm talking about. If you pick the right people in your life, in business or whatever, you're not going to have these fucking burdens because you're not that guy trying to carry the team by yourself. You know what I'm trying to tell you?
I agree with that because that's how I was growing up. Of course, my parents split up in an early age, but with who I treat as my dad is Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
And he was the one who was always working. My mom was more the one that was able to do those things for me. I mean, I had all the retro Jordans. I just had about everything, you know, and they started me on that. I didn't start buying it on my own. They bought me my first car. I had, you know, there was this time that I was like, oh, I want this pack of shoes. And it came with two retros. It was like $350 for the pack. And she was like, this is a little crazy, but they still got it for me.
Yeah.
Every Christmas, I got whatever I asked for. So I agree with that, but I'm talking the people who are like major monster CEOs in a business without that partner. You know what I mean? And that's when the kids are like, they don't know who's raising them.
But Winston, he made the wrong decision. So let's think about this. So I know a top CEO. His name, he's the founder of Extreme Networks, right? And he's a chairman. He's fucking as a billionaire. And so you look at his decision. They grew up in California, but they all went to South Carolina. But you look at these guys, and the wives are at home killing it, maintaining the stuff, and they're fucking billionaires. And so the nanny's not raising the kid. It's when you get someone in your life that doesn't have the same common view. Like me and John can't mention people, but we were talking about this, and he gave me the example. And I was like, well, what the fuck is that chick doing? And we're like, and you know, he said, and he looks at me like, you're right. And so if the guy's going for the big time event to make the goodness for family, or reverse, if the chick's a fucking badass and she's at Sandia and killing it, I had a friend who's like, I'll be a stay-at-home dad. He fucking loved it. He's like, I just want to, you know what I'm trying to tell you? So what I'm saying is that you have to say, dude, who's going to be the leader in this group so that we don't have these fucking burdens in our life? And financial burdens are a motherfucker. I don't care what anyone says. You can't get good healthcare.
It's true. And that's a true team effort. And I'll bring this example up because I saw it the other day. I was watching a TikTok, right? And this guy, the teacher calls him and they're like, sir, what bus is your daughter on? He's like, why are you think to call the dad? He's like, there's two names on there and you call the dad like it was a joke, right? But it's true because he and what you're saying, he was the established leader of doing that. And the wife was the one to where she handles all the stuff and information for the kids. But it's funny because it was totally true. And that's the exact thing that you're kind of saying, you know.
But in that dynamic, I would have been that person that would have known those things. See, because my ex made more money than me. She worked longer hours, but I got home every day at 2:30. I was able to go to school, volunteer with them. I was able to I played that reverse role.
Yeah.
Whatever, probably not reverse, but it was just a different
priority.
Role.
Reverse priority.
A different role. But that's exactly, you know, so
just like positions on the field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a position that needs to be filled. If you want to be a championship team, you have to have that. Without it, I mean,
look,
Jordan didn't win anything until he had a Pimpin and a Rodman. You know what I mean?
You know, I give an example of this, right? And I laugh my ass off. Winston will laugh at this. You know, man, but I love his fucking shoes. But we use the guy, Kyrie Irving, right? He just got fined majorly. And there was something about not wearing the mask. But fuck the mask. What they were pissed about is that he did a party and he just didn't even show up to the game.
Oh, yeah. He took several weeks off.
Yeah, he just fucking said, fuck it, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that's not a championship mind. And so when I think about that, like, you want to get away from LeBron and you want to do your own thing, but you can't even act as a leader on your own.
He's just going through some serious stuff right now. I don't know what's going on.
That's the mental burden is that he can't get out of his own way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's not the championship mindset. So then they're like, what did the Nets do? They're like, oh, hell, we need to bring someone else in. Kyrie's going off his rocker. Then they brought in James Harden. Now look at James Harden and Kevin Durant are back together killing it.
But what I'm saying is, look how fucking crazy that is, right? You're going back to the old sauce. I mean, you look at James Harden, he was a sixth man, fucking being phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right? And then went to Houston.
And then he just said he knew, okay, James Harden was the limelight in that team, right? But he said the team's just not good enough. He didn't have those fill players on his team, which was understandable. And they probably didn't have the money because James Harden's contract was so big to bring a superstar.
Correct.
So then Brooklyn has it. And they're like, well, Kyrie, we don't even know if he's going to be on the team. So we'll fill in James Harden. And now they're arguably going to be a championship team.
But see, the thing is about it, when you think about that, right? This is what I'm talking about. Is you're not bringing those mental burdens, the partying or whatever into it. This is where I go to LeBron. That's why he fucking wherever he goes, there's a championship born. And I'm talking about you're not creating those mental burdens.
Because he's not a head. He's not a head case.
He's not a head case.
Yeah.
His life's his personal life's there. And this is what I'm talking about. That's why I love so much about LeBron James, right? You look at him and his wife's not in the limelight. You don't even really hear about her. And obviously he loves her and they're together. And you look at them, right? And his whole shit is like it's squared away. Everything that he does, if his family, about his kids, they're talking about LeBron Jr. is fucking killing it. He's about to come up. But what I'm talking about is everyone's putting the team. Like he says, without my wife taking care of the children and doing the stuff that I've done, I can't focus on basketball.
Yeah, it's a team effort.
But she's not on my ass. Like, oh, where the fuck are you? He knows he's got to practice. He does stuff. He has his routines. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's working out. He sets up the routine. And he's like, you, my wife's in there. But if she gives out, she's got to go. She stops at, say, 30 minutes. Let's just give an example, right? But that guy is setting leadership skills, and it's not creating a burden. But imagine if you have somebody, and she's like, well, no. Fuck you, LeBron. I'm going to do it this way. And you're like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
so now you created
he's not going to be LeBron James.
No, he's not going to be LeBron James.
Be LeBron James' wife.
But do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And so what we're really talking about, guys, is look at your life and ask yourself, what fucking burdens are in my life, and do I really need them? Because they're not really a type 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's a type 2.
Yeah, and that's the thing we've always said is the elevator taking you up or down.
Exactly.
You know,
but with the mental burdens, like what I talked about in the earlier, are you living in your mind thinking, I gotta help my mom and I got this mental burden, but you can't even fucking help yourself?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fucking oxymoron.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot help anybody if you can't help yourself.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to build yourself and eliminate all your burdens or whatever you think, and then you're
till
willing
you get to that level.
Till you get to that level.
Well, just like how we started the podcast, right? I said, I believe everyone has a decision for their action. I'm not going to be here trying to get someone their life together when I'm only 24 years old, trying to launch a business for myself. Am I in a better situation? Sure. But I'm still working to get mine to where you, for example, you're like, oh, if I see someone, I don't mind giving them $20, you know, but that's putting you in the situation to where you're so at that level now.
Yeah.
It's fine. And you're capable of doing that more often.
I'm going to give you an example, dude. We laugh at this all the time. Me and him always laugh, right? And so we have to redo a couple of Suite C, and you know, we have to get to this ADA compliancy, and the fucking piece of marble is expensive as shit. And I'm like, fuck it, okay, we got to get it done. Let's get it done. Then I said, you know what? Some fucked up some shit in the back. And I said, fuck it, redo all the floors. But like you said, when I make those decisions, the level of fuel, actually my needle's not even moving because the tank is so full, the volume's so full. But back in the days, I didn't even make a decision and say, I'm going to buy a shovel to dig a fucking hole. Because I'm like, what it's going to be. But I think like for me, I never brought those physical burdens like children, 10, you know, most guys that have been in my age that have been super successful like me, CEOs, been married twice. And they're like, oh my God, I got 2 sets of family. I was like, fuck that. I don't want any of that mental burden. I don't like financial burdens. Carson knows that, you know, I'll negotiate everything in my life. I treat everything the same way because I think the worst burden for me is when I'm at my zero. And I've explained to people my zero is not zero. My zero is 7-figure zero. Mm-hmm. But when I get to that level, I'm fucking stressed out. Like I don't like it, right? Because I'm like, well, fuck this, that, the other.
I've been in that situation too. And it's the same thing. And people are like, why are you freaking out? It's like, this is not okay for me.
Yes. Because you're not going to create that mental burden, right?
Yeah, because you don't want to almost go below that. My fear of that is going below that and saying, oh yeah, we'll make it work. Like, you know, some people are check to check or this or that. And I'm like,
fuck no.
Because
you know what's crazy?
You know what I mean?
What you allow a burden, you ask, what broke the fucking camel's back? And that's what my original statement was.
Yeah, because one thing leads to another, and another. And then you say, that's okay. Oh, that's okay. And then you start saying that's okay to a million things. The next thing you look like,
then you're going to make it
just happen.
So right about I was like 3 weeks or a month ago, I went on the podcast and I was like, how you doing? I said, I'm fucking killing it. But I've been having these stomach issues. Now my stomach's on fucking par. And what I realize is this. I just can't fucking handle chili, not because of the heat, because something in the acidity just fucks me up, right? So I'm not going to go there and, you know, say I'm going to your mom's. I'm going to use your mom for an example. I hope she's not listening. But if she says, okay, he thought I'm going to give you some chili, I got to be able to say, you know what, ma'am, or you know what, Mrs. Chavez here, I can't eat chili. And I'm going to tell you why, because I'm going to be fucking sick for 3 days. And then those 3 days, it's going to affect other shit, right? Mm-hmm. And what I've realized in my life, I just am very hard, like, sorry. I'm no spicy, and don't get your feelings hurt. So if you're going to invite me somewhere spicy and there's not anything else, I can't go with you. Just so you know. Mm-hmm. It's a physical thing. I'm not going to live with the fucking burden on my stomach for 2-3 days after to make you feel good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like that. And it's crazy. Even like Michael says, when we used to do the big Halloween parties, I said, dude, I'm not going to be slopped in with a bunch of bottles and shit like that we're sharing. It's going to be VIP or nothing. I get my own couch. I pay for my own couch. I'll tell you who's going to sit on my couch,
Right.
and that's just who I fucking am.
Yeah.
Right? But at the end of the day, because I know how my mental state works, so I have to protect my own mental state. No one knows what my brain's going to be, right?
Mhm.
That's what I'm talking about. So I think today is really touching that piece. We kind of wrapped all the
Yeah, it was all in one.
all in one, wasn't it, John?
But that's kinda how it flows.
Spiritual burdens.
Yeah.
I mean,
You know what? Let me just touch a little bit about this because I didn't touch upon this, and then we're coming close our close. But let's talk about this. This is huge. So people say, "What's a spiritual burden?" I'm going to give you an example. So you may be stuck in a belief, and you make this spiritual burden about like saying, "I'm going to read about Buddhism," and all of a sudden it's like, "Well, that's blasphemous." And that's not really the statement you're making. So you're making a burden for yourself because let's use me for example. I'm pretty as Christian as they get, but I'm not going to force my beliefs on you. But I also believe that in my world is that, Jesus died for our sins and through him, we're going to get to heaven, period. Doesn't matter what the fuck we do. So if I'm studying about Buddhism, I'm not committing a sin because I want to know, right? I didn't say I'm studying about statism because I don't give a shit, but there's certain things within grasp that don't allow people to create these spiritual burdens where you now feel like, I got to do this. A lot of churches were doing this and it was a lot of bullshit. A lot of churches were saying, you need to tithe this much. And I, in my lifetime, knew people that were tithing and couldn't pay their fucking mortgage. And I'm like, that's no common sense. That makes no common sense to me. Or you got to be part of this group, but you're not putting in the overtime that you need at your job so you can get out of the financial burden. And so they would just be doing this stuff because they think spiritually that's what needs to happen. And that's not true. Because when you read, if you really sit down and read biblically certain
It's kind
things,
of a lot like the Catholic Church.
yeah. You know what I mean? If you read a lot of the situations like that, it was really to control humanity because people were really fucked up. So let's give an example about that, right? I was born and raised Catholic. I'm still Catholic. And so you think about how the Catholic Church was formed. When the Catholic Church was formed and created the catechism, the reason it had to come into place at that time period, everybody was a bunch of barbaric individuals. So I'm really bringing the barbarians from fucking England, the Germanic tribes, and I'm coming and saying, now I want you to believe in this. Well, fucking ain't going to believe in that. I mean, they believed in Odin. They believe in all kinds of different gods. So in order for you to bring that, you couldn't deliver the Bible to somebody and say, you can't even fucking read. So how am I going to give the Bible to somebody if someone doesn't know how to read? So you couldn't do that. So when you really think about that, yes, in Catholicism, you get the Catholic guilt, but it was in order to create some type of laws because that's when there wasn't a separation of church and state. So in those times, the church was the law.
Well, after the fall of the Roman Empire, they were the one in Western Europe. They were the one dominant institution because when the Roman Empire collapses, there's just these little fragmented states that really don't have the power to build roads or to have militaries or law enforcement. But you had the one, and at one time was the largest property owner in the world, the Catholic Church, so they were able to become that. They filled that power vacuum. But you also saw popes during that time that were extremely rich. They adorned themselves in gold and fine silks when that's
Joel
really
Osteen.
exactly like modern versions of that. Like these guys now with their PPE money, they buy jets or whatever, and it's just.
And he said the tithing money was insured. So,
Nice. I got to tell you, and I like to touch this because I listen to a lot, but I always make everyone laugh, and I always tell people this. I says everyone likes to bang up the Catholic Church and talk about what the Catholic Church has done, but what they forget, what the Catholic Church has done in a whole, right? So there wouldn't be the education system. The Catholic Church is sole-handed why there's college. And
the Jesuit system was very influential in spreading university, that higher learning. Absolutely. No,
women wouldn't have got educated if it wasn't for the Catholic Church. That was that's how the nuns were getting educated. Second of all, I always tell people this, and I laugh my ass off, and I'm like, so you want to go to the Mayo Clinic, right? And they're like, yeah, that's where I want to go. Founded by the Catholic Church. And so when you look at all this, it wasn't the fundamentals of the Catholic Church. It was people that do bad shit within the government. It's like the United States, right? We got bad leaders. It's not the United States. It's the bad leaders. And so I think what happens is you get these offshore people that say, well, I'm going to bang up an entity. But for me, I'm going to talk about something big that makes a headline, not something small. So if I'm going to attack something, I'm going to attack something big because that's a headliner, not something tiny. No one gives a shit, right? And so those are the things that I always try to enlighten people and say, look, guys, ultimately, when everything went to shit, the reason that there's two divisions of the Catholic Church, because it's all Christianity, but it was because the king said, you know what? I don't want to fucking stay with my wife. I want to divorce her ass and I want to marry the sister. And that's exactly where it started stemming from. And so one of the things that this is what I like about you, John, is that you study stuff so deep from a factual state. Once you get all those facts, then you can actually come up with something and say, well, this is why I think it's there. Mm-hmm. Versus when people will say, I'm going to make a statement and then there's no facts behind it. It's just, well, you know what Johnny Schmo told me, or the fucking pastor down the street.
I think, you talk about spirituality. I think, and my parents, my little sister was killed when she was 17. That Catholicism brought them great comfort. They'd go to church 7 days a week. They put a stained glass window in the church. They paid for that. That provided, and it can provide you with immense comfort and immense strength to survive, to function. But from a historical perspective too, I poke holes at some of the things that they do, but I also see it at a micro level of seeing how important it was to my parents and how important it is to some people. Now, can it be taken too far? Absolutely. And can it be corrupted? Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's the flaw of man and its free will to fuck things up.
But without when you look at it, right. And this is like when you really think about when I think it was Pope Innocent that was really fucking up. And I might have this fucked up this one.
Not so much Innocent.
Mark Lutheran.
Yeah, no.
Martin Lutheran said, I'm going to break away. And he says he puts all the letters on the Pope.
95 Thesis.
Yeah, and he said, I'm going to create the Lutheran Church. And that's what all we know our modern day Christians is broken off from the Lutheran Church. But he still kept pretty much everything based on Catholicism, instead of saying the number one thing they were fighting was the Pope said, if you donate all your money to me, I can buy you to heaven. He said, fuck no.
Pardons for indulgences.
And they said, there's no way in hell. That's the only difference, right? And I think that when I think about that in my life, right, because I always mess around with my Catholic priest that I grew up with, Father Adam, and I challenge him on stuff. And he gets that smile. He says, you're smart. But you look at this, right? We have a bunch of different laws in our lives. And without those laws, the common people can't get their fucking mind around shit. Right? And that's what's crazy. So we've realized in life is we need to create some type of order to get the sheep to do something. And sometimes it's not a bad thing to be a piece of the sheep. It's better to be a sheep within a field than a sheep going over a cliff. You never ask a sheep when it's being eaten by a fucking wolf that he's having a good time.
No, sheep are essential.
Right.
Sheep are just like, you look at any ecosystem, everything plays a part.
Everything plays a part.
I mean, you look. I've been watching Yellowstone documentaries, and when the wolf was gone from Yellowstone, well, what happened? Well, the rivers were out of balance. Why? Because the elk would just sit there and frickin' graze and get fat, not let any trees grow by the rivers, and things got out of balance once the wolf came back, fuck, you gotta run. Now there's only strong some bitches up there, And
the disease.
Oh, yeah.
I watched that Yellowstone, John. People don't realize that the fucking disease from those elk were actually wiping some of the deer. It fucked some of the buffalo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's why they had to actually inbreed the buffalo and then create bison. That's really a cow and a buffalo because they were just fucking killing everything off. And you have to have that balance,
again,
right?
It's like your life, nature, it all takes balance, and if you go too much in one direction,
I look at this, John, and I want to lay this statement down. I always say this, right? I've started at the bottom, really, and I came to the top. No matter, I've had friends from all walks of life, bad guys to good guys to this. And when people ask me an opinion, says I really don't have an opinion for either one because at one time in my life I was walking in that path, so I can't say shit, right? But what I can say this: when someone comes in and they're very convicted about something, right, and they're like, you know what, I fucking hate, pink underwear. And you're like, why? You find out that they made them wear pink underwear when they were 3 years old, right?
Or Joe or
something weird, right? And when someone's ever convicted very strong about something, I always sit back now and ask myself and say, yeah. I ask myself, you know what? What the fuck were you so convicted? What did you that you're so pissed off, right? And so in life, that's what I'm saying. That's what that whole spiritual convictions and not really doing that and making it so tough for you to actually free flow. And that's why for me, I can go to all denominations, sit with them, learn what's there, and I say, you know what? Ultimately, it really doesn't matter. Here's your end result, right? Because it all lays it out real smooth. And I'm gonna have that. It's gonna be cool. Probably the next 4 podcasts, I've laid out something pretty strong. I got a lot of my old readings, so probably the next 4 podcasts, I got something that's just gonna be pretty phenomenal. But guys, I want to close up. We're past. I hope that you don't. I hope you learned a lot today. And like I said, at the end of the day, don't let burdens rule your life. Get rid of those burdens, and I'm sure you'll clean shit up. So we're out.
See you guys next week.
Laying it down, hand being.
Harmonix Technologies, your New Mexico business IT solution. With incredible products that will fit your needs both big and small, and unmatched service, it's your vision delivered. Learn how we can help your business roar into action today. Harmonix Technologies, your New Mexico business IT solution.